Hinshaw is a retired research chemist who's been growing orchids for more than 40 years. During these years, he had the good fortune to receive about 30 AOS awards, of which about half were for Phalaenopsis. He has a small greenhouse, a light room, and about 1,200 plants, and does his own tissue culturing at home. He enjoys putting in displays at the spring orchid shows in Indiana and Ohio, with Phalaenopsis as the backbone of his display. Let's welcome Michael.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I've given this presentation in Cincinnati, so someone may have seen it before.
It's a good one.
You don't count, Larry. All right. We want to see it.
So anyway, I've been growing these for 40 years, and I started, it was just coincidence. I was working as a chemist at Dow Chemicals research facility in Indianapolis, and one of my coworkers was from the Philippines, and she brought in these incredible flowers. I had never seen anything like this. I didn't even know you could buy them, and she wouldn't sell me any at all. So in conversations, though, I did find out that there was a gentleman in pharmacology who was wanting to get out of growing orchids. And I went and talked to him, and he said, sure, you can have them all. I'm getting into music, I need that space, so just come over this weekend. So I'm driving there, I'm so excited. In my mind, I'm getting like a whole truckload of plants that look like this. But when I arrive, I find that he hasn't watered them for about a month. They're desiccated, half-dead little things like this. And I took them home, and I decided that the best way to resurrect them was to just put them outside under a tree, and in the morning when I went to work, I would just mist the plant. And they recovered. They started growing leaves. And I went to repot them, and they didn't have roots yet, but I was encouraged. So I moved them inside, and I babied them over the winter and all of that next year, and then the following year they started blooming. And I was addicted. So I had a sunroom, and the first thing then was, I'm going to buy a lot of plants and fill this room up. Well, and I did. And then I decided that I needed to build a greenhouse to accommodate my overflow, and I did that, and it filled up also. So I grew in that environment for about, maybe 13, 14 years, and then we moved to a different community, and I built a dedicated greenhouse just for Phalaenopsis. And this is the interior of that greenhouse. And the problem with that greenhouse was, see the white tank out front? That is a propane tank. Every 10 days I would have to send a check to the company for $400. So it was like arm and a leg. So what I did when we moved from this home to where we live now, I built a house where built a greenhouse with the purpose of optimizing it for low heat cost. And I actually heat this with a 120 volt heater. And here are the Phalaenopsis. They grow just fine. This environment offers different things. It can be sunny and cold down near the floor. It can be shady and warm up higher on the shelves. And it's a double-edged sword here. It's adjacent to my living room, so I can just walk out there in a few seconds. The downside is that you can just get sucked into this orchid black hole for hours at a time.
Always the case.
So the plants really do grow well. This particular Phalaenopsis has won Best of Show in Cincinnati on several occasions. So they do like it out there. They grow quite well. And I assume that everyone here comes from different backgrounds. Some people are experienced growers. Some people are just new with Phalaenopsis. It's a comprehensive presentation. And I want to start here where this is where they come from. Most of the Phalaenopsis we see in stores, they'll have the name of the cross and then the clonal name. And These are actually clones of an award of a plant that was selected in the field as a superior plant, and that's what they made commercially available. And the way that they do this is that there is dormant meristematic tissue beneath this sheath, and you can actually use this too. Just remove the sheath, buy some plant hormone, and just smear it on that little bright green spot. And in about 6 months, you'll have a little plant, and then eventually it'll grow roots and you can remove it. Sometimes it does it on its own. Sometimes one of these plants will come out at the base from one of these areas. This is the Kiki growth hormone. This is essentially 6-benzyl aminopurine, which causes elongation of tissue. And that's it smeared on the stem. Easy to do. However, since I'm kind of nerdy and I worked in a laboratory, I decided what I really wanted to do was I would do stem propagations in test tubes. So I bought some tubes, I bought some disposable plugs, and some tissue medium, and I sterilized this, sterilized the stems, and I have a spray bottle of hydrogen peroxide, and I just keep the environment as clean as I can while working. I've learned to insert the stems, and about 80% of them work. But that isn't quite good enough for all the work, but it works. I mean, I don't care. If I have a plant that's got like 4 or 5 of these little stems, and I already have 2 or 3 of them, I just don't want to lose the plant. So if 20% of them end up contaminated, it doesn't matter. And then when they get to be a little larger, I move them over into a larger container with rooting hormone, and they grow roots into this. And then when I see visible roots, I just pop it out and acclimate it to the outside world, and it's a plant ready to go. Now, in a large operation, and some of you are probably aware of this, the meristematic tissue, they tumble it in a low viscosity solution, and it grows a large mass, and they chop that up and they continue tumbling. As long as it doesn't have an opportunity to orient with respect to gravity, it will just keep growing this undifferentiated mass. So that's how, when you go into a store, you see like hundreds and hundreds of the same kind. That's how they made it. Every once in a while, I'll see some plants where it's like, ooh, I really like the color of that flower. Ooh, and I really like the way this one grows and it's big. So I decided I'm going to make a hybrid. And I don't know if you know much about the Phalaenopsis flowers, but let me see if I can get the pointer up here. Yeah, right here, beneath this cap is where the plenty of masses are. All of the pollen is clumped together in a mass, so it can be delivered all at the same time. If you put a toothpick, I lost it again. If you put a toothpick behind this, there's a sticky strap and it'll stick on the toothpick, and then you can insert the pollen into the female part of the flower, which is just behind the septum here, and you can see it'll stick, and then you pull the strap free, you can see the pollen stuck in there. She used a toothpick to kind of center it, and then you wait about 180 days, and you have a seed pod. Now, I have some show and tell.
Oh.
This is a seed pod that has popped. It probably has viable seed in it, but it's contaminated. And this is a mother flask that I made that has babies in it. They're really dense. They need to be plated out into another flask to thin it a bit, and then with different chemicals in the medium. And then while I'm at it, I want to show you that this, see this container? This is a 3-gallon nursery container. I think, yeah, this is 3 gallon. This is what I end up potting my Phalaenopsis in. They get to be quite large. They're like 2 or 3 feet across. And the flower spikes are like 4 or 5 feet long. Big plants. We'll get into how to get there from here. So, I made this. It works. You know, I went to Kmart, got a tub that had a clear bottom. I got some flanges that these are for toilets. And I
Toilets?
strapped on some rubber gloves on the back side, and I spray the whole inside with, again, hydrogen peroxide. And then I make sure everything that goes in there has been sterilized, and I give it one last spray with hydrogen peroxide, and then I get to work on the inside. But it does work. It was cheap, and I like to use containers like this when I'm working with it. The middle one is an Erlenmeyer. It's easy access. The one on the far right is a Chinese milk bottle. I get flask from Taiwan in bottles like this. So once I remove these plants from the flask, I just wash them off, remove the medium, put them on a paper towel to dry them a bit, and then I put them in a community pot. And the trick is to get the plants acclimated to the real world. They've been growing in this environment where it's nice and humid and it's just perfect. But the real world is not that way. So for transition, what I do is I close them up in a Ziploc bag for about 2 weeks. And you can see the two on the right are that way. And then the ones in the middle have a little teardrop opening that I folded into the end. This starts the process of getting them acclimated, and then maybe a couple weeks later I just open up the bag completely and they are fine. And they really are fine. These are Phalaenopsis babies, and what I'm going to zoom in on this photo. See, the leaves are barely larger than the granules of perlite, and they will live. They'll be fine. As long as they get treated halfway decently, they'll be fine. Within about, let's say, a year, maybe 15 months, they're this big, and this is approaching flowering size. And I get a lot of questions like, how do I know my Phalaenopsis is in good shape? Well, if you feel the leaves and they're nice and firm, you don't see wrinkles on them, and you look at the roots are nice and full, and they're silvery with either green or red tips, you have a good plant. It's happy. Sometimes people say, well, how do I tell the difference between a root and a flower spike? Well, the roots can come out anywhere around the base of the plant. The flower spikes always come out on the side, and they have like a little blade coming through. We noticed that the cornucervi that was over here for sale looks like it's going to bloom. I should have sold it. So the light requirements. They will grow. They're really flexible plants, but the problem is that at this end, the bottom end, they're not going to get enough energy to flower. So you want to stay away from that area, but you may not have a lot of choice. If you're just growing them in a house, or if you've got lights, you can live that in. At the higher end, it's just too much energy. The tissue's damaged, the plant just won't put up with that much light. And it'll tell you that it's having problems. If it starts developing a lot of purple pigment, it's like saying, hey, over here, move me to a little shadier place. And if you don't do that, then you begin to see bad things happening. In this case, you see the disintegration of the chlorophyll on the leaf, and the bottom leaf is actually becoming desiccated. And if you don't respond by then, you'll get this. So they do burn. They burn easily. So what do they need for temperature? Fortunately, a lot of orchids are really exotic. They require like low temperature and 100% humidity. So it's impossible to do that with any ease at all. But Phalaenopsis like the same conditions more or less that people do. I have grown these for a long time, and I find that like 61, 62 degrees is really good. 60 is okay, but you're going to start to see some spotting from fungal infections. And higher than that, when it gets up around 95 degrees, you have problems with calcium metabolism. So new growth that comes out at those temperatures is just not as robust. It doesn't work as well. Now, they're native to Southeast Asia, and they have these high temperatures all the time, but like they're in a tree, and they're getting breeze, and it's much cooler. It's not as bad. But in a greenhouse in Indiana, where they're getting the sun bearing down on me. Also, the thing about the cooler temperatures, and this is a growing secret. I'm passing on some secrets today. All those little sheaths along the flower spike, Each of those could become a branch with additional flower buds. And the way to encourage this is just to grow it at low temperatures. Low temperatures induce the branching. The other thing too is that low temperatures improve the quality of the flowers. Probably in most plants that's true. Here is a case where the water was setting on the edge of the pot and it got a little too cool, and you can see the bacterial spotting begin to form on that leaf. This leaf is toast. There's no way to recover from this. I mean, you could cut out the center of that, but if you see there's kind of a line of color now that follows the whole rim, this leaf will be gone probably in about 2 or 3 weeks. Now this is a case of where what you're looking at here is this is a harlequin pink that came out when it first came out, the temperatures are really cool, so the color of the older flowers, it was nice, and it was what it was supposed to be. The ones that opened up at the front that developed when it was warmer don't have the color. So all this is the same plant. So the humidity requirements. 30, they'll go down to 30, okay. You know, they're going to be sitting there on the edge of being desiccated. 60 is fine. Above that, like at 90%, they start getting spots. And I can't get my greenhouse that high anyway. In fact, I joke with people and tell them that my greenhouse is actually a desiccatorium. But it does get a little dry. But if you live here in the Midwest and you have central heating, you need to have some kind of way to deal with this low humidity. You need a humidifier, you need pebble trays, you need some way to address this. And here's another cultural secret. This is the way that I like to look at these plants and try to have it in my mind how they work. The moisture coming into the plant has to be the same as the moisture going out of the plant. And the leaves are always losing moisture. Also, it uses moisture to open up buds. If you try to open up a bud and you're not watering your plant or the humidity is too low, the bud will desiccate. If the plant's growing along and it's not getting enough moisture and the humidity is too low, it will lose a bottom leaf to bring everything back in balance. So if you look at your plants and you're losing bottom leaves, and it's the winter and you think your roots are good, and you can always just pop it out and look at the roots. If you think the roots are good, humidity is too low. So if you have good humidity, it's advisable to keep the air moving. And nothing fancy here. Anything works. Just go buy a cheap fan. Buy a cheap fan, put it over in a corner, just give some motion to the air. Now the medium, anything will work. I saw a Phalaenopsis a while ago growing in pretty coarse bark. That will work, but you have to water it more frequently. I use ProMix because it allows me to water just once a week, but it's really dense material and it's dangerous to use. If you overwater it, like once or twice, your roots are gone. So it needs to be prepared before you use it. I kind of fluff it up, add the moisture I need, and then I use plastic pots and I use peanuts on the bottom.
Michael, can I ask you, what is ProMix?
ProMix is ground Canadian peat with perlite.
Okay.
And it's slightly acidic. It's easily available. You can buy it at like Walmart, at garden supply stores. It's cheap. It's like $35 for a big bale that will last you forever. I like it because the pH is kind of unfavorable for bacterial growth on the roots. And the other thing too about it, and it's in this area, repotting. I do not like to repot orchids. I mean, I understand that that's the time when you learn the most about your plants, but I don't like to repot. But if you grow with ProMix, it's really easy because all you do is grab the plant, turn the pot upside down, give it a tap, and separate them, and the ProMix just dumps out. And you can kind of just brush the roots off, and it's ready to go. It takes like 10 seconds. If you grow in something else like bark, you've got pride, all the rotted bark off there. Or if you have something like sphagnum moss, I don't like that at all. I mean, they grow great for about 3 or 4 months, And then it becomes really treacherous, and when you repot, it's a huge pain. So I like Promix, but it is dangerous. So when I repot, I do it when there are more roots on the outside than there are on the inside. And it makes perfect sense. These things, they grow in the wild, and if they can get established around a branch or hold onto the trunk, then they don't get blown out in a storm, so it's a survival technique. And it works well, and when hybridizers go after like size of a flower or color of a flower, they don't think about the roots. So they brought this trait along to the modern hybrids, and you just have to deal with it. I use the smallest pot possible. I try to repot when the roots are dry, and the reason for this is that, in my opinion, they're more flexible when they're dry. When you water them and they soak up a little water, they're like little pieces of celery, and they snap, and then you end up with an avenue for bacterial infection. And you can repot the phales at any time. Since they don't have hair roots, as long as you're reasonably careful, like if you're on the edge anyway and you have flower buds developing, you probably wouldn't want to repot it. But otherwise, anytime you're curious about how your plant's doing, just pop it out and take a look at it. So watering requirements. I've seen this so many times. Water just as a medium begins to dry out. What does that mean? It's a useless statement. What I do is I have all my plants in the same size containers, and they're filled to the same depth. And so what I can do is pick them up and tell. I can tell if it's heavy or not. Like if they were clay, it would be a guess. They have some of the moisture meters that are adapted to coarser material that would be useful. And I see people using the clear plastic pots, which is helpful because you can see the moisture. But if I pick it up and there's some uncertainty, I stick my finger down inside and see if I can feel the moisture. And I try to water early in the mornings, and I use very dilute fertilizer. And I flush them occasionally to remove salts. And here, this is important too. Never use straight distilled water or RO water on your plants. Or never use don't go over to a fertilizing regimen where you are using just straight calcium nitrate, because the Phalaenopsis, the uptake of the cations, is strictly passive. It sucks it up through the velamen, up through the vascular tissue, and then there are ion exchange sites along this tissue, and they grab a hold of whatever's there. So if you use slightly acidic pure water, it'll be all hydrogen ions. And so about 6 months down the road, you're going to have mineral deficiencies in the plant. Same with calcium. If you use calcium nitrate, you go, well, this is great. Plants low calcium, they need the nitrogen, but it's like you've got about 6 months. And then one time when they go to flower, the spikes they're going to be black. You're going to see potassium deficiency. You'll see the yellow bands of the leaves that begin to turn sunken and nasty. So I use like RO water reconstituted with about maybe 20% tap water. We kind of have hard water where we're at, maybe around 300 parts per million. I use just the dilute fertilizer. I think the total concentration there when I'm done with my fertilizing water is around 250 parts per million. So it's still good quality water. And Phalaenopsis, they're not picky anyway, but they don't like straight pure water or just calcium nitrate.
What do you think about using, what's that chicken feed stuff, the ground up oysters? Can you put that in your media?
I do that on TAFs and certainly frags. And I think that it's more like black magic, because if you think about it, it's like essentially insoluble calcium carbonate. You're not going to boost your levels very much, but it doesn't hurt. I throw it in there anyway. It's more of an edge. I mean, I try to be scientific. But every once in a while I do just magic. So.
Yeah. Okay.
So I buy a lot of flask. I grow the plants to maturity. I'm always looking for the best 2 or 3 out of this 25 or 30 plants, and occasionally I find them. I used to buy a lot of flasks from Carmela, and this is one that popped up. And here was another Carmel class. These are really pretty little flowers. There were just clouds of them. It's like 50, 60 flowers. It was a great, great plant. And then this plant, this flower, I actually got this awarded down here in Louisville. It was a really large flower. I'd grown it from flask, and on subsequent bloomings, it was even bigger. And then I started buying from the new ones that were coming out in Taiwan. They were really nice hybrids, pretty asymmetric spotting. You can begin to see the first of the harlequin pattern developing. And then I ran into a lady in Florida, Diane Davis, who was the AOS judge. I started buying some plants from her. This was a huge, sometimes it's more than just the color of the flower or the flatness. This one loved to just orient perfectly. It was shingled. I mean, it got an A+ in shingling. The flower was like the color was like a B+, but the shingling was an A+. It was very good. And then they started making a lot of the old famous Phalaenopsis available as stem propagation. So I started buying those, and I was thinking about using them for breeding, but I find out that most of them are triploid and are sterile. But they were still nice plants. I bought them anyway. And then the wave of plants started coming from Taiwan. The ones that Norman was selling, Norman's orchids, and they were wonderful. They were so pretty. I bought a bunch of those, and then they were all virused. We had a speaker who came down from the company that makes the virus testing, and she did some testing for us, and I bought some of the test strips. And I was going to test my Cattleyas to make sure that they were safe, and the Cattleyas were fine. So I had all these extra strips, so I tested some of my Phalaenopsis, and it's like, oh, holy cow, these are all contaminated with virus. And fortunately, I had more on the way, and I had a package from Norman's Orchids that had just showed up, and I tested it, and they were 60% of the plants were virus. So then I went into the quarantine area where I had some plants that I'd purchased from him a couple weeks earlier, and they were virused. So then I go over to the far side of the greenhouse where I had some little stem propagations that I made like 3 years before off my big plants, and they were fine. So I didn't lose everything, but I lost like years of growing the big ones. So I threw them away. So my suggestion, actually 2 suggestions here. If you're really serious and you have the money and the time, you could test the plants, you could develop a barrier strategy, you could be real careful with what you buy, you could minimize the movement of everything on this list. You could do all that. Or you could just say, you know, I haven't been very careful. Now, I've been buying Phalaenopsis for about 10 years. I'm just going to throw away the plants that don't look very good and assume that they're all infected. And I'm going to follow good procedures. I'm not going to splash from one to the other. I'm not going to hang so that it drips down onto the plant underneath it. You know, just good practice. And I think that that would be sufficient for most people. But I wanted to have nice, clean plants because I had a lot of plants. So I decided to do the virus testing. It cost me $3,000 to do all the testing. It was a sad day, very sad. So under pest, that was like maybe 12 years ago. So the other things, Phalaenopsis are beautiful. They flower every year. The flowers last a long time. They're wonderful, but the trouble is that they're susceptible to everything. All the bugs like them. They're susceptible to all the diseases. Mealybugs and scale. If you see them, use systemic. If you're looking for a new hobby, then you can take alcohol and cube them and just dab them on your bushes. But you're not going to kill them. You might offend one of them or 2 of them, but you're not going to get rid of them. The next thing on the list, the little pill bugs, the ones that roll up, I find that those actually come out and chew on your plants at night. I go out at night with a flashlight and look around, and I actually see them chewing on roots. They must, exudes some kind of like feeding pheromone that attracts the others, because whenever I see one moving, he's by himself, but when I see him feeding, there's like 7 or 8 there all chewing away. They can do a significant amount of damage. The next thing, thrips. I don't know, do you guys know what thrips are? Oh, you need to learn to identify thrips. Thrips are one of the few insects that can function as a reservoir for virus. And they're also very mobile. They can fly from like the African violet that's 3 rooms away into your orchid collection in just a few minutes. And the larval forms do a lot of damage, and they're really fast. You get a magnifying glass out there and you look and you go, what is that little brown wormy-like thing? And they're just zipping around the flower. Those are thrips. You don't want thrips. If you suspect it, the first indication is usually there's like a little burned edge on the edge of your flowers where they have been feeding. If you see something like that, pull out a magnifying glass and start looking around. Slugs cause a lot of damage. They don't like salt. I actually enjoy putting salt on slugs.
Spray them with hydrogen peroxide, that's fine.
Yeah, anything like that. Yeah. I mean, you can be like very modern and use the slug bait, things like that, but I'm an old-fashioned kind of guy, so salt works great. So the other thing is that you can just use mechanical things. You can, like, if you've got a vent, put a fan up right next to your vent so when the bugs come in, they're just physically destroyed. Get those little sticky yellow and blue sheets, put them around in your growing space so that the bugs land and stick on those. They work great. So, more secrets I'm going to share with you here. Even if you do a really good job with your Phalaenopsis, they're growing along, they're happy, they're just about 15% of them, the spikes will do something weird. They'll twist around, they'll be bent. Here's an example, kind of out of focus, but you've got a nice straight flower spike with most of the buds in the same plane, but you've got these lateral spikes growing parallel to the main one. So what I do is I just grab some wire and make these little supports and push them out. I do this all the time. Every year, since I started doing this, I do this every year, and I do it on about 15 or 20% of the plants. Every once in a while, there's a disaster. The light will change, you'll move a plant, and the flower spike will twist 90 degrees, and the bud will come out in the wrong position. So, of course, you can't submit this for AOS judging, but it's very easy to do surgery on something like this. I just get a razor blade and whack it off, and then this also works. This is another secret. Don't promise not to tell anyone. You can actually take the wire, take about like a 5 or 6 inch length of the wire and bend it into a little U-shaped clip and slide it over the base of the bud. And what it does is that the weight of the wire will actually cause the flower spike to rotate back in plane while it's growing. So if you have a flower that is really doing well, it's got a plant that's doing well, it's got a bunch of flowers on it, but it's got that twist, you can fix that if you catch it in time. So making your own hybrids. I love to do this, and I'm terrible at it. I rarely have any successes, but it's always a fascinating experience. This is a Phalaenopsis that has Stewardiana in the background, and what is unique here is that Stewardiana causes the fine spotting to be dispersed across the petals. So I also had the first generation Harlequin had spots across the petals, and I thought, I wonder if I could cause those to coalesce into well-defined spots across the whole surface of the flower. And sure enough, you can do that. But I forgot altogether about the lip. I brought the nastiest looking lip along with all the hybrids. However, every once in a while, I had one that was kind of interesting. It's like, ooh, I believe that if I could flower another 20 or 30 of these, 30 of them, I might find a good one. And I was wrong. So every once in a while, you get something that reverts to what the parent did look like. Here's a pretty lip again. and the spot diffused across there, but the form is no better, and the size and the color really are no better than the parent. So from a breeder's point of view, this was a failure, but it was fun. So here's the big pink one, the warded pink. Oh, by the way, the clonal name Peggy, that's my wife's name. The strategy here is that if I name my warded plants after my wife, she will let me keep buying orchids. And we'll find out if that works. I haven't reached the point where I have to say, Peggy, I want to go over and see Sam Sui and drop 900 on some glass today. I have to try. So anyway, I had this large pink, good shape, good growth habit, and I had this interesting little red. Now, you guys are probably aware that in orchids, if it appears to be red, it's actually purple with a permanent underlayment of yellow pigment. So I knew that when I crossed this, I could get interesting colors. I might see the yellows coming out, and so they started blooming this way. You know, if you're not generous, and I can tell all of you guys are generous people, but if you were not generous, you might look at this and say, well, that's a flesh-colored flower. Who would want that? But I like to think of it as art shade. I had a couple of them that popped out like this, and they had just a hint of the violet in it. I liked it. It was pretty.
I like it.
So I've been talking about growing in a greenhouse. Don't be discouraged if you don't have a greenhouse. We have a grower in Indianapolis. His name is Dan Herring. He is one of the best Phalaenopsis growers, and this is Dan's growing area. He just grows them on furniture. He has windows that work quite well, and in fact, every once in a while there will be a bench up next to the window. But you can see what Dan has done here. He's tried to accommodate the lower humidity that he would experience in the winter by putting trays with the grids in them, and then he keeps water in that. And not all the plants work well. I mean, if you look at the plant, the one that on the far left down there, it's kind of desiccated and it's going downhill pretty fast. All the leaves are smaller than the preceding leaves. It's coming to the end of its life. Oh, and another thing too about, you know, when people talk about, oh, I rescued this plant, don't do that. Don't do that. Take the weak plants, the ones that aren't growing well, they don't deserve your attention. Throw them away. Go buy nice ones. You know, spend your time with the winners, the ones that grow well, and learn from them. Because the plant that you get anyway at the store that is not growing well and looks so sickly could be virused. So, it would be an impossible challenge trying to turn it around. If you don't have a good window, they grow just fine under lights. Here are Phalaenopsis growing under lights. This lady, she was a professor of math at one of the schools in Indianapolis. I like her a lot. She has an interesting strategy in dealing with plants. It's very scientific, very math-oriented. But she grows under lights. The light rack is in her kitchen, so that she can easily transport the plants to the sink when she goes to water. I mean, you have to figure out how you're going to manage the logistics of taking care of your plants. I don't know what Dan does, because his plants are scattered all through his house. But anyway, this is the summary here. They're easy to grow, but if you want those large plants, those ones that grow in those big pots, you have to optimize the conditions. You have to grow them with the intention of keeping your roots in really good shape, because if your roots are in good shape, then they will support more leaves, and if you have more leaves, you can store more energy, and if you have more energy, then you're going to have more flowers. So it all makes sense. It's just that every once in a while when we first begin to do this, it's like you just don't know quite what's happening. So they are susceptible to nearly every problem. They grow fast, and boy, they can really die quickly. I don't know if you guys have ever had crown rot, but if you're a little sloppy and you get some water in the top of your plant and it's like, ooh, it's late in the afternoon, I don't have time to dab that out. Then like a couple days later, you go to touch your plant and the whole top just falls off. And you look at it, it's like this mushy, nasty stuff where the plant used to be. That is crown rot, and it's easy to get it.
I've had it happen after making very sure that I never watered the plant and left water in the crown.
Well, as hard as you were trying, you failed. Sometimes you think that this plant is dry because you were so careful, but you might be watering one over here and the water is splashed into it. Another strategy that you can use, and this works well, do it early in the day, do it on a day when it's going to be sunny or warm, and then like use a sprayer and deliberately spray it right into the crown of the plant. So you kind of like just wash out the center where all the leaves are. Because if you can clean out that debris, there's not a lot of stuff for bacteria to grow in. So it needs water, it needs a little mix that's interesting there in the crown to really get going. So if you can just wash that out and then avoid getting it wet. I never get crown rot anymore though. And so I know it's possible. So just keep at it, really, if you try to keep it dry. So the thing about the future here is that when I first wrote this, I put it's not good, but that is like from my perspective, from a serious grower. I'm not a commercial person, I'm just a serious hobbyist. It's not good because I can't just go out and buy interesting flask anymore. No one's doing the hybridizing. So if I want something, I've got to do it myself. And I've already learned I'm not very good at it. And I don't have import permits. I can't buy from like overseas or somewhere like that. So I could just kind of take what I can find. But the whole landscape is changing. It used to be it was like seedlings that you could pick through to find a really good one. But all you see now in the stores are the same 20 or 30. You and I have the same leopard prince offspring, that little spotted harlequin. We both got it at Hauserman's. I've seen them many places. They're a wonderful plant, but it would have been nice to be able to buy a flask of it and all of its siblings. There might have been some interesting things in that flask. So because the box stores are selling these and the prices go down, that just drives out the few growers and hybridizers. But the one that, for me, that's also a really problem is that when I pick up a plant, it's like, I like this plant. I'm going to take this home and do some hybridizing with it. And I look at it and the name says like, Sparky's Razzle Dazzle. It's like, that is not a name. Somebody's just made up a name. And if you went into the Royal Horticultural Society's list of orchid names, you will not find that name in there. Now, it could be that they're lazy, could be, or it could be that they wanted to save some money, because it does cost money to register a hybrid. But I suspect that they want to conceal the path that they use for breeding, so that their competitors don't know how they arrived at a flower that looks like this. So they just use stupid names.
Very rarely do you see tags on fails.
Yeah.
Very.
Well, it's even worse in Europe. When I go to visit my son and his wife and the grandkids, there are Phalaenopsis everywhere, and I never see a label anywhere.
There's not around here either, except on very rare occasions.
So anyway, this is all I have. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to. Yes.
I was given a really pretty Phalaenopsis, and the flower spike was coming right out of the dead center crown.
That's the end of that plant.
Okay. I will spend time taking care of it.
It could be encouraged to grow another plant out one of the, all along the side of that plant, there's dormant meristematic tissue. The plant knows it's screwed up. So it will grow a new plant out the side. And the other thing along those same lines is that if you use rooting hormone, I forget what it's called. It comes in a small bottle. It's like some magic elixir that you're supposed to put in
Root
your...
tone.
Well, root tone is more direct and it's clean, and you know what that is. But there's another one that you're supposed to add like 3 drops to your...
It's a little brown bottle.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the name of
Well,
it is.
if you use that and spray it into the crown of your plants, you can actually grow roots right out of the center. It's like, and that's the end. It's like, that's where the leaves come from.
Yeah.
once they quit coming, that's the end. So.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
got one at the Mid-America in Kansas City a couple years ago. They had a beautiful spike on it, and the flower was very nice. And the next year, the spike came right out of the crown. So I thought, well, that didn't go away. I still got it, and I thought maybe it'll grow.
Uh-huh.
But instead, it's put on the side, on the other side, it's put out a new spike now. And
Oh, yeah.
it hasn't got more leaves.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, it's gonna die, but it doesn't go ahead and make another plant, but it's got a spike coming out now. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, because the temperature change will induce it to flower again.
Uh-huh.
If it's got any stored energy, it's going to flower. It's just not going to grow it.
Right.
But it will. Usually they know enough that they will grow.
That's what I expected, Kiki.
Yeah, probably will. Yeah.
How is it coming with the blue Phalaenopsis? Some years back, there was all this hype that they were making.
The blue ones? Well, the blue and the violacea is still there. That's a legitimate one. The ones that are in the stores where they've injected
No,
the dye.
That's like the green carnations for St. Patty's Day.
You know, when you start breeding with the blue, I've not seen that blue brought successfully over into the standard size.
I saw one at a big show in Brazil in
Yeah.
2012, and it was listed as the true blue because it was awfully expensive
Oh, I
to
bet.
buy one and bring home.
Well-
But I've not seen it afterwards.
If you hybridize in that way, it's like you've got the gene for that blue color, and you've got the great big size on the standard phale, and if you cross them somewhere, if you grow enough of them, you're probably going to get that combination that you want. But you'd have to flower thousands and thousands of plants to get it. It's kind of like crossing, a Chihuahua and a Saint Bernard. You're not going to like the outcome. So.
And then another question. I have wonderful, huge Phalaenopsis plants, but no flowers.
Well, if it's gotten enough light, all you need is a temperature change. That 10, 12 degrees, daytime, nighttime, in July, August, it'll flower.
July, August,
Put it outside, tip it slightly and hang it from a tree outside so it gets east light coming in.
They're
And
huge. The plants
Yeah.
are like this big.
see, when it flowers, it'll be a champion.
If it ever will bloom.
Okay,